Hey everyone. I bet you guys are pretty shocked to hear from us.
It's been a minute.
It's been a minute. Life happened and we kind of took a little break and to do a little regrouping. That's just life.
Life was
And
lifing.
life was life. Yes, life was life. So
We're coming out of hiatus.
come,
Briefly,
yeah. Right now, we're shaking it off a little bit.
knocking the dust off.
And we started this podcast about a year ago because we wanted to do a different perspective. A lot of times when you're dealing with military medicine or civilian medicine, first responders, anybody like that, we're always talking about what we do. We're talking about our job, the life that we saved, the situation that happened, but you never hear us talking about us,
Their perspective.
our perspective, right? Like what happened to us? How did we cope with that? How did we thrive through that? How did we survive through that? How did we not? Where were our failures? Like all that stuff. So we wanted to come from that angle, but we also wanted to do it in a way that we also understand. And you know what that is?
As the break room.
The break room. That's what we call it. So it's all that dark humor, witty humor. Anytime you made a joke and then you had like the whole table look at you and you're like, oh, well, that was a bad idea. Yeah, that's kind of how we approach all the bad stuff.
The
And
things you're not going to say at the front desk.
exactly. And it's okay. Like we want to be raw and real. We want to laugh. Uh, and that's how we process, right? We don't
Commiserate, trauma bond. Sometimes.
healthy trauma bonding. Is that a term?
We could coin it.
We're coining that, right? Healthy trauma bonding in a healing sort of way.
Yes.
That's it.
There's a good thing on the other side of that.
That's what we're doing. So we had an opportunity arise. A lady reached out to me, say, hey, I wrote a book and interested in talking to you about this and see if we could come on your podcast. Now, let me give a little backstory here. The lady that we're bringing on, Sarah Blum, Vietnam vet nurse. So these are our predecessors. These are our glass ceiling breakers. These are the women that we looked up to when we joined the military that paved the way for all of us, right?
She's kind of a big deal.
She is a big deal. And I really, like, I called them Z. I was like, hey, we got to do this for two reasons. One, just because of who she is and what she's doing and what we're going to talk about today. Two, way back, we did for Veterans Day,
Yeah.
we did a whole episode on all the different important medical first responders in the different services.
Showcase them and their contributions to medicine.
And one of them that we talked about was Colonel Ayoun. And Colonel Ayoun was on Operation Baby Lift in Vietnam, and she was on the plane that crashed, and she survived and was still alive. So me and MZ were on the hunt, and I found out that she was where we were, and I was trying to find her because I really wanted us to interview her and talk to her, and that was just living history, and I was just so excited. And I couldn't find her, and I would put feelers out everywhere, and we couldn't find her. Well, I found out probably about 6 months later, the reason why I couldn't find her is because she had cancer and was getting care for that, and her family was caring for her, and she passed away. Mm-hmm. And it crushed me because I really wanted to talk to her for so many different reasons, but just that history and capture it and just to be in her presence, like all that
would have been an absolute honor.
Yeah. And so when we have another Vietnam nurse reach out to me, oh, heck yeah, we're coming out of hibernation.
Detox called and said, hey, MZ, put some pants on. We're going back to work.
We're going back to work. That's right. Get over whatever. Let's go. We got to do this, right?
So get it together, girl.
That is the backstory, the long version of it. But I thought it was really important to share that. And so we are so excited to have with us Sarah Blum, and I'm going to read her bio that she gave. And it's very modest and very succinct, but we're going to get into it, and she's going to talk more about her story. So Sarah Blum's a decorated nurse, Vietnam veteran, who served as an operating room nurse at the 12th Evacuation Hospital in Cu Chi, Vietnam, during mass casualty in 1967. She received her bachelor's degree from Seattle University and her master's degree from the University of Washington. Sarah retired as a nurse psychotherapist at age 80. Because I mean, why not? Forget retirement. Let's just go. After 34 years of doing trauma healing work, aka girl's an expert in trauma bonding and how to heal. Between 2006 and 2012, Sarah interviewed over 58 women veterans and is the author of the book we're going to talk about, the second book. We're going to talk about the first one first. Did I say that right?
I think so.
I think so.
Yeah, I think so.
We're going to talk about Women Under Fire, Abuse in the Military. That is her first book, and we're going to talk about that on a different episode. And her latest book is what we're going to talk about now, recounting her own story, Warrior Nurse, PTSD and Healing, which is going to be released March 6th, 2025. And Sarah just had a birthday on December 5th, and she is a very young 85 years old.
Happy birthday
and the reason
to
why
you.
I say this is because currently, like when we were trying to set up this and schedule it, the day we picked, she goes, "Oh, I think I'll be able to do that. I'm going to be at my cabin in the mountains." And I was like, "With who?" "No, just me. I just go up and I go skiing.
You hit the slopes.
By myself."
No big deal.
At 85. And I said, "When I grow up, I want to be you."
I wouldn't blame you one bit.
I know.
Sarah Blum's goals.
All right. Was that enough, Sarah?
Yeah, so just to clarify, my last name is Blum. It sounds
Blum.
like plum.
Oh, I'm so
It's
sorry.
Blum.
Pardon me.
Listen to me.
And it's Cu Chi, Vietnam. It's Cu Chi, Vietnam.
Did I say coochie? I thought I said coochie. What did I say?
You said chai, which is good. Made me think of chai tea.
You know why? Because
We're
we're
sitting
drinking
here
chai right now.
sipping it.
I kid you not. That's why I said chai. I thought I said chi. Horrible. Thank you
So-
for the corrections.
Yeah, so it's Cu Chi, yeah.
Coochie, coochie, coo.
Coochie coo.
I know.
That's
we are.
right. That's right.
All right. So, Sarah, like when we met, we met earlier, we had this pre-meet, and you pop up on the video, on the Zoom call. And I was like, oh my gosh. One, I know that we don't do this as video, but Sarah looks at best 65. And she's wearing like an Under Armour sweatshirt, and like she looks like she just came from the gym. And I was like,
Girl's killing it.
I know, big girl aspirations here. So talk to us. We want to hear from the beginning, your story.
Like when I went to Vietnam.
First, we want to know what keeps you young at 85. That's the first secret. Like, what are you doing that lets you go out skiing by yourself in a cabin in the mountains?
Oh, I focus on my health and my body, and I do exercises every morning when I wake up, and I eat healthy, and I keep active. And I think it's being active and participating in music. I don't know if I sent you that link from Path with Art, but I will if I didn't. Yeah, playing music, it really helps. Writing helps. Writing really helps. So all the things that I do really help keep me moving and keep me active, and I think that keeps me young.
You're a bit of a drummer, right, Sarah?
I am. I love the drum.
I wanted to hear all about that.
Oh, but I do African drumming mostly. So yeah, back in the early 90s, I met Babatunde Olatunji from Nigeria, and I started learning African drumming, and I fell in love with it. And so for 10 plus years, I was in a drum ensemble with a bunch of other drummers, congas and ashikas and djembes, like I played. And in an ensemble, nobody has the same part. So you have to hold your part. And so, but all the different parts together make this beautiful music and beautiful song. So I couldn't do it anymore after my fingers got arthritic. And so I went to a music therapist, and I found out that I could drum with mallets. And so I have a barrel drum. It's actually like a samban. If you look up African drums, it's samban. And so I have that, and I play with Music Works for the Number 4 Vets group out of Tacoma, and I play at Path with Art in Seattle when they have their music jams. I play then, and I have a blast. In fact, the link I'm going to send you, if you haven't seen it, has some drumming in it.
That is amazing. So if I'm hearing you correctly, the secret to life is good music
That's one of it. That's part of it. Yeah.
and some good health, good choices, good habits, good music.
And a lot of heart and spirit.
I love that.
Heart and spirit.
We're not lacking in that department. We just need to get our butts moving more.
Yeah, guilty.
Although I came from the gym, I will say.
You go, girl.
You might smell me a little.
That's all right. I still love you.
All right. So everybody need to take tips. These are the tips to a long, healthy life. And
That's it.
by Sarah Blum.
Yeah.
Got that?
Now we know we've got the secret.
Okay, so now let's back up because it wasn't all rosy, that's for sure. I mean,
Oh no.
I can tell you that I read the book. Well, I started reading the book, and we'll get into that in a little while, but I will say you didn't hold back, you hit hardcore. So I want to go back to you in Vietnam and what led you to your story, to the book that's coming out in March.
To the book, yeah. So after I did the first book, all of my story got shoved over into another file because of the nature of the first book, right? So then in 2016, I thought it was time to bring it out and do something with it. And I didn't really know exactly what I was going to do with it, but eventually it came to be this Warrior Nurse, PTSD and Healing.
But it's your story though, right? This is your story.
It's my story, but I had put it aside to finish the first book because there were so many women who had so many horrendous experiences of being sexually assaulted in the military, and I wanted to just stay clear-eyed and focused on that. So now I pulled it out. I pulled my story out, and then I decided to work on that.
So what 19, what year did you join the military?
1966.
And you have a cute story. What led you? Well, cute.
Yeah.
Led you into that?
Yeah, when I was 9 years old, I made a career booklet in school. Like I'm sure, well, everybody had to do it in our school. And so I made this career booklet, and in it, I was a military nurse because I was 9. All I knew was Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, I think. But I don't think Marines are in there. I think it was Army, Air Force, and Navy.
They have to use the Navy for their to pick the bullets out. You need a Navy nurse to come pick the bullets out of their butt.
So in this career booklet, I was a military nurse. And then in nursing school when I was 19, I was sitting around with all my classmates, and I said, if there's ever another war and I'm single, I'll go. So then fast forward to LA 1966, and I was 26 years old, and I started hearing on the radio about a place called Vietnam that I'd never heard of in my life. I never heard that place ever. And I heard that they were fighting and that guys were getting wounded. And I thought, oh my gosh, I think I'm supposed to go. And so I started out at the Air Force, and I wanted to be a flight nurse. And they said I was too short. You had to be 5'2", and I was only 5 feet. So then I went to the Navy, and I wanted to be on a hospital ship because that was in my career booklet. And they said, well, you have to spend 2 years at a Navy hospital in the United States, and then we'll put you on a ship. And I thought to myself, well, the war will probably be over by then. So, because what did I know, right? So I went to the Army, and their arms are out, and they said, we need operating room nurses. We'll train you, and you can go right over. And I said, all right, I'm in. So I signed up for the Army Nurse Corps, and I went to basic training at Fort Sam Houston, Texas. And if you want to see something funny, watch the doctors try to march. That is really a riot.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Wait, I got to tell a quick story to that. That's hilarious you say that. So I was stationed at Lincoln Heath, and I worked with this doctor. He was really quiet. He was very nice. But when I would see him, his walking didn't match his personality. So he would come down the hall and he would turn the corner real quick. And he was very precise in his walking. And I thought, that's so weird because he's so gentle and quiet and laid back. And it's just funny to see this mismatch. And we were talking one day, and he thought that's how he was supposed to walk. He had just come out of like his training.
Sir. Sir.
And just for the civilian audience, you have to understand, like when doctors go through schooling, like through the military, and they become doctors and they're going to join the military, by the time they get to a base, they're actually like captains, usually. Like they've worked, they're like first lieutenants go into captain, or they're captain.
They get the expedited track.
So people look at them as having 4 or 5 years of experience, probably has some knowledge, like what to do, but they don't. They're like little baby deer. They have no idea what they're doing, right? And they're all over the place. So when you say that, I'm like, oh, absolutely. And so I was like, that's not like, that's
You don't
not
have to do that.
required. Like, and especially in a hospital, you're going to scare people. Like, what? Really? I'm like, yeah, no, don't do that.
I bet the enlisted people were looking at him like, man, this guy, let's see how far he goes with this.
Just let him go. They
Yeah.
probably knew we're laughing.
So I was after basic training at Fort Sam Houston, then I went to Letterman General Hospital at Presidio of San Francisco, which doesn't exist anymore. And I was there for 5 months for the OR course. And I had to go through this long corridor to get to the operating room. And lining the corridor were all these guys in the royal blue pajamas that were the Army's version of pajamas, and they were all in wheelchairs, and a lot of them were amputees, and this is 1966, May 1966. And so the first time I went down that corridor, it was like, oh, it was just, I could feel them. I could feel all of them looking at me. And so then I realized that I won't be able to do this. I have to leave myself, like the first time I did it, I left an hour, but it came to me 90 minutes. I had to leave 90 minutes early to walk down that corridor so I could talk to them, get to know them, hear their stories. So I knew all about Vietnam before I ever got there from their stories. And I would go to physical therapy sometimes with them and cheer them on and help support them, because they're amputees, and it's really, really hard to walk on a part of your body that wasn't designed to be walking on, like their upper thighs for them.
Right.
I can only imagine what the energy was like in that corridor for both sides, for you to see them and have a little bit of an idea of what they've endured, and for them to be back home and alive. Just kind of an interesting dynamic there. Did you feel like what they were sharing with you better prepared you to go in later?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was there for 5 months, and as soon as I was done, they gave me orders to go. I had a short leave, and then I went to Vietnam from there. So yeah, and the trip over to Vietnam, I went from Travis Air Force Base, and this is now January 67 that I went over, and we went through Alaska and Japan, and I'm in my summer uniform, the summer short sleeve uniform that nothing in it, and it was freezing cold, and they left us in the hangars outside, and there was nothing hot to drink. It was really horrible. Yeah. And so we get over there, we get to Vietnam, and we landed at Ben Hoa Air Base, and there were 200 of us nurses that were all going together to go to the different hospitals over there. And so there's 200 OD green duffel bags offloaded of this plane, and then they put on a show for us. That's the Air Force, so they wanted to show doing their I think it was F-101s at the time, and they were doing their loop-de-loops and flying around in formation and putting on a show for us, because here we are, 200 Army nurses.
I bet they were relieved to see you
on the tarmac. And so they put on a show, and then when the show was over, they said, okay, go get your duffel bags. And it was 110 degrees. So I went through Alaska and Japan, 11 and 21 degrees, and then Vietnam, 110 degrees. And then I was glad I was in my short sleeve summer uniform then, but the sweat was just pouring off me until I could find my duffel bag. And then they took us by bus, OD Green Army buses. And so I noticed when I was getting on the bus that over the windows were this crisscross, heavy duty metal crisscross twisted wires over the windows. And so when I walked in the bus, I said to the driver, I said, well, what's with the crisscross wires on the windows? He said, well, this is a war zone, ma'am. That's to keep the grenades out.
Oh, goodness.
So
Welcome to Vietnam.
yeah, so that
So
was
it's
it.
not a telemarketing problem.
Yeah, so that was it. Welcome to Vietnam. And so we met with the chief nurse. So this is all the nurses. We met with the chief nurse. We all had orders going over. And I had my orders were for the 71st Evacuation Hospital in Pleiku. And everybody else had their orders as well. But we're in this big room with the chief nurse, and she's talking about a lot of the hospitals weren't built yet. She named mine, 71st, not built yet, so you're going to go somewhere else. And so everybody is getting their orders to see where they're going. And I was assigned to the 67th evac at Quin Yon. And all I knew about it was that it was on the South China Sea. So I thought, well, that'll be nice. But they take care of mostly civilians. So I said, wait, that's not what I signed up for. Anyway, while that was happening, I noticed there was a young nurse. And I say young because I was 26, right? And she looked like she was about 20. And she was sobbing her eyes out, and there was nobody with her. So I went over to see what was going on with her. And she was terrified, literally terrified. She got orders to go to the 12th Evac Hospital at Cu Chi, and she must have known about it because she was, as I said, she was terrified, she was sobbing. And so I got her to calm down enough to tell me what her MOS was, and she was an OR nurse. And I said, well, I got an idea. Come with me. So we went over to the chief nurse, and I told the chief nurse, this young woman is terrified to go where she's assigned. She and I have the same MOS. Why don't we swap assignments? Because where I'm going, I think will be a lot nicer for her.
Wow.
Can you tell us why she was crying over Cu Chi? Where was it located?
So Cu Chi is on the edge of the Iron Triangle, and that's where all the fighting was at the time.
Right.
And our hospital was the largest user of fresh blood in all of Vietnam during the time that I was there in 67. So it was the worst place that you could go. And so we did get our assignments swapped. And then that night I went to the officers club, and I met my 2 drill sergeants from basic training. And what are the odds that that would happen?
A familiar face.
Yeah, so Sergeant Phillips, and I forget the other guy's name, and so I sat down to have a beer with them, and they said, where are you going with your assignment? I said, I'm going to the 12th Evac. And you could see the blood just drain out of their faces. And I said, what? And they said, oh, you don't want to go there. Get that changed. Get it changed. I said, nope, I changed so I could go there. They said, well, keep your head down all the time, because it was the worst place you could go in Vietnam.
I think that says a lot about your heart, Sarah, that you were willing to do that. That's amazing.
Okay. So yeah, so then they take me from, so we're at Long Binh, that's where all this takes place, Long Binh, and then they take me from there in a helicopter to go to the 12th Evac. And so I'm out at Ben Hoa Air Base in front of this helicopter, and what I see is they don't have any doors. There's no doors on this helicopter, and there's no seat belts. And I said, well, what's going to keep me from falling out?
Grab on.
And so it's a short ride, but still no seat belts, no doors. And so I'm in this helicopter, and now I'm scared. So we're flying to Cu Chi, and we're flying treetop level. I'm seeing all the trees and everything. And then we get there, and they won't land it. They wouldn't land it. They were hovering over the helipad, and I kept pointing down, and I kept shouting down, no, and they just kept saying no. And so I had the only thing I had with me was my baritone ukulele, because I have to have music, because I knew I would not make it if I didn't have some kind of music. So I took the baritone ukulele, and so I bent my knees a few times, and then I jumped down on the tarmac, and it was very hard. It's not cement, but it felt like cement under it. It might have been cement underneath the big thing that they had out there. But anyway, so I could feel the sting go all the way up my legs and my spine.
Why wouldn't they land? Were they it was too dangerous, or was it?
I don't know. I think everybody ever told the story to, so they were initiating you, so I don't know. If it was
That
that.
honestly, that's not uncommon. That wouldn't even surprise me.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Right.
Thanks
So
for the
then-
lift.
And then so that I'm in this desolate place and it's completely desolate. And oh my gosh. And so I'm saying, where am I supposed to go? Like I'm looking around, I don't see anything. And they point to a building that's at headquarters. I wouldn't have thought of that. But anyway, so I go over to the headquarters building and there I meet the most strapped executive officer that you can imagine. I mean, it's in the middle of a war. And this guy looks like he ironed his fatigues.
Wow.
He
So
had to
anyway-
been, he must be like a West Point grad. There's only two types, like the completely adapted. Any military academy service, you're either completely adapted or you're completely maladapted. Those are the only two choices.
Okay, well, anyway, so I go into the headquarters because I have to start somewhere, right? So I put my ukulele case down and this guy is, I don't know how to relate to him anyway. So I put my ukulele down and I saluted and I said, Lieutenant Blum reporting for duty. And he said, what's in that case that I put down? And I said, well, it's a machine gun. I thought I might need it over here. And he didn't think that was funny. So I spent about 20 minutes getting yelled at and screamed at and told how insubordinate I was and all this stuff. And then
Start.
finally he turned me over to the chief nurse. She was perfect. She was great. Major sister. And so she said, well, you have today, I think it was mid to late afternoon. She said, you have tonight and tomorrow and then you're going to be on duty and you'll probably never have time again. So fix up your space, get it all fixed up because you're going to need to have a place to lay down and, put your stuff. So I had to learn how to scrounge and find a whole bunch of stuff. And so I got some wood and I got some masonite and got some nails. I never built anything in my life. So I didn't know what to do. I knew what it should look like. But anyway, I made a set of shelves and they stayed together for the whole year, which is good.
Dang.
I was able to pass it on to my replacement when I left. Anyway, so I got everything together and my stuff came on a truck. And so we're in this great big hooch and there's no rooms. It's all one big thing, but we have like bamboo netting between our bed spaces and then these beads hanging in the doorway. So we had a little bit of privacy that way. And then I went to work and that was it for the rest of the time I was in Vietnam. I was working 12 to probably 16, 18 hours a day. Casualties were constantly coming in because of where we were and what was going on. And so we served the 25th Infantry Division. We were on their base camp and we served them. And we had the wolfhounds and the bobcats and the manchus. And those are some of the ones that I remember.
How long were you there for a year?
I was there for a full year, yeah.
A full year.
1967.
And how many years did you serve total?
Almost 5.
Almost 5. So you're seeing the worst of the worst of the worst daily, day in, day out.
Yeah.
And I know people have asked me in the past, like, hey, do you miss nursing? And I always have like 2 answers. I'm like, yes and no. I miss the patients and I liked doing the patient care. And like, I didn't like to be bothered. Give me my chart and let me do my thing. And I'm fine. Like I'm great. But no, because everything around it and the bureaucracy and I dealt with, just I'd run into those people that didn't like women in authority positions and like all kinds of stuff. So for you, when you were there, what were you experiencing outside? Like it's busy. So you got operating room, you're really, there's not a lot of time, but there's always time. You know what I mean? Like what were you experiencing outside of, like, how were you being treated as a person?
I always like to hang out with the enlisted guys because they treated me better than the officers. The officers, I used to say, Even an act of Congress or an act of God couldn't make a gentleman out of them.
Interesting.
So I hung out with the enlisted guys, even though it wasn't appropriate, you know, I'm not supposed to, but they were easier to be with. We could just be friends and we could just talk about life and home and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I did that. But so I was there a very short time, maybe a month or so. And if I forget, remind me to tell you about this. I'll tell you about the first mortar attack, but right now I'm going to tell you about. So we were invited to a party, a general's party.
Mm.
And we were allowed to wear dresses, and we had them. So I ordered a dress from the Sears catalog.
Oh,
You could order from Sears in Vietnam back in 1960s.
that's amazing.
Damn.
The OG Amazon.
Well, we had an APO address, right?
Yeah.
They just sent it there. So yeah, so I got my dress from Sears catalog, and so a major comes in a helicopter, and he said it's a champagne flight, and he had a styrofoam case filled with ice and champagne, and we had styrofoam cups, and he was giving us champagne. And we get to the party was at Benoit. It was at Benoit, the area of Benoit, not the Air Force part, but the Army. Third Surge Hospital was at Benoit there. And so we go to this party, and it's great. I mean, the food was awesome. They had real glasses, real plates, silverware, things that we didn't see.
Yeah.
It was just plastic. We had plastic. What do you call those things that we had to put your food in the different sections?
Oh, yeah.
To-go container.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Trays.
trays. So this was real glass and excellent
Fancy.
food. It was really fancy, yes. And so this was a party for the general in charge of the 190, what was it called? The Light Brigade, 198th Light Brigade or something like that. I can't remember the name, but it was a party for him, birthday party or something. And so they'd invited all the nurses, and we got to eat all this great food and hang out. And that's when everything changed. So here's this general in charge of Big Red Run, that's First Infantry Division, and he's drunk as can be, and he's putting cigarettes in his nose and his ears. Oops. And he grabbed me and he put me on his lap, and he said, I'm gonna call for you whenever I want you. I'll bring a helicopter to bring you to me whenever we're in a safe area. And I looked at him, and he just grossed me out because of what he looked like and what he sounded like and what he was saying. And so I looked for an opportunity to get up, and I said, I need to go use the, what do you call that thing in the Army?
The latrine.
A latrine, yeah. I need to go use the latrine. I got up, went, and I tried to figure out what to do. How can I get out of this place safely? And so what I did was I waited until he was distracted and he was looking a different way. And then I snuck out, got out of the building. I found the major who was the pilot of the helicopter that brought me. And I said, can you take me back to the base? Because I'm done with this. He said, not till tomorrow. So see, they had it all planned. So I started walking around the hospital there, the Third Surge Hospital. And I'm walking around, and it's dark. And suddenly there's a voice comes from between two of the buildings. And he said, ma'am, can I help you? I said, well, I hope so. Who are you? Anyway, it turned out he was an enlisted guy, and he was from one of the wards. And he said, it looked like you need some help. I said, well, I could use some. I just found out that I can't go back to my hospital tonight, and I need someplace to stay that's safe. And I'm not staying in there with those drunken officers. And so he actually got me a place. He talked to one of the nurses, and he got me a bed on one of the wards. I didn't actually sleep. I didn't actually sleep that night because the guys were in pain and they were moaning and all that stuff. But at least I laid down. I closed my eyes, and in the morning we got a ride back to the hospital, and I went right into the Major Cicercia, chief nurse of our hospital, and I said, well, that's the last party I'm going to. Don't send me to any more parties. I'll stay here and work. Send somebody else, because that wasn't for me. That wasn't.
What was her response?
Just, she totally got it. She didn't need anything. She said, I got it.
So what were the other women experiencing? I mean, obviously you weren't the only one. 200 nurses got dropped off there in Cucci.
Oh, no, not at Cucci. No, there was 200 that got off at Benoit, but we all went to hospitals.
Got you. Well, still, there's 200 nurses that are now Vietnam, and what
Yeah,
are they
yeah,
experiencing?
I don't know about them. I just know that I wasn't interested in that.
Did you hear anything like where you were from was there any talk? Was there any concerns like where you were? Or were you guys just so overloaded working? Is that all you
Yeah,
was going on?
Yeah, we just were overloaded constantly with casualties. And we had cookouts, and those were fun. And
Yeah.
we had cookouts, and they would cook whatever kind of meat and stuff they had, and we would all be out there, and sometimes we could wear civilian clothes because of being in the OR, and the OR was actually right by the area where we would meet to do our cookouts.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as we heard the helicopter, I knew. I mean, I would get my food and just hope to God that I could eat it before the helicopter came.
It sounds like a scene at a mash.
Yeah, well, I was just sitting here thinking, I wanted to ask. It's what I'm envisioning is the show with the green tents and just the hustle and bustle and tons of stuff going on and hot lips with hand, like that's what I'm seeing in my head. Is that kind of true?
That's it. Except that we were semi-mobile. So the thing is, 12th Evac was an evacuation hospital. We functioned as a surgical hospital. So it was all just like in MASH, is exactly like that. And so we couldn't keep the casualties longer than 5 days because we had so many coming in all the time, and we only had so many beds.
And just kind of stabilizing them, it sounds like.
And then they go to another evac hospital, like in Vung Tau, they could go to 36th evac there, and they could have more time to heal up. But a lot of them, if they were wounded to the degree that they couldn't go back to duty, then we would do what we could, send them on to an evac hospital, and then from there they would probably go back home somewhere closer to home in the United States. And so there were 2 guys that stood out for me in that year. One was called Johnny, and he was hit by American artillery, and that's the most horrible
like injuries.
Yeah, right now I'm not thinking of the words that I want to use, but he was like completely mutilated, blown apart, mutilated, and we could only save, like, he lost all of his legs from high hips all the way down, so there was no way that he could even have a prosthesis. So that was one of the, and I have done a lot of healing, a lot of processing with that, and so his story's in the book. That's the Warrior Nurse PTSD and Healing book. And then there's another guy that's in there, and his name is Jim Bynes, and he was with the Manchus, the 4th and the 9th, and he had wounds really all over his body. And we do the wounds in order of priority, like which are the most severe. The most severe we do first, and the least severe. So we had done all of the wounds and his legs, his abdomen, and he had a wound to his hand, and that wasn't done yet. And the chief of surgery, who, by the way, I'm in touch with now, again, and he's writing a book.
Oh, wow.
I have to tell you about it. His name was Stu Patricia. He was the chief of surgery. Anyway, so he said to me, Sarah, you do the hand. I said, but sir, he's a pitcher. He's a baseball pitcher. He said, I have to go. There's another casualty in the other room. I have to go. You have to do it. Just do the best you can. And he was out. He was gone. So that story's in the book. And then, and my connection with him that I made afterwards, because he called me. He found me. He saw my patch on my uniform on a picture, and he called me from Texas. He was from Mineral Wells, Texas. And he called me, and this is in 2014 after the first book came out. And he called me, and we talked on the phone for 2 hours. And then he invited me down there, and I got to see his hand, and I thought it looked horrible. Didn't bother him at all. I thought it looked horrible. And so that story of going through that is in the book. And also the nurse killers is in the book. So we had these locusts, they were about that big and they were red and they would hop and fly. And so if you open the door to the OR during locust season, they would just come right in.
Oh, God.
And so if they landed on a wound, and when I was doing Jim's hand, one of them landed right on it. And I said to my corpsman, okay, I'll give you 2 seconds to get that off of there or I'm out of here. And so
That's what the patient wants to hear. Like, wait, what?
Kill it with fire.
he was asleep. He was asleep.
Oh, that's good.
But that's the kind of thing that we went through. So
let me ask you this. So, because we, obviously we want people to read the book, but when you talk to me about like, so some of these things, patients and stuff, you were in the worst of the worst places, and what you were seeing was traumatic, dealt with a little bit of misogyny there, a little bit of you were so busy, thank goodness, in a way it was probably in that sense saved you guys, right? Because you didn't have time to deal with any of the shenanigans. But when you came home after a year of this, and that's, I mean, like, did you have days off? This was 7 days a week, 6 days a week? What was your?
it was pretty much 6 days a week.
Yeah.
When I had time off, we had some stretchers we put out between the hooches.
Yeah.
And we would just like fall asleep on the stretcher out in the sun.
Yeah, I believe it.
And let your bodies recover.
Body just needs that. Yeah. And it's funny because you come back, but you don't have downtime. You are constantly on alert. I mean, imagine, I say it's the civilian population, imagine going to a barbecue and sitting there on edge because you're listening for a helicopter the whole time, because as soon as you hear the blades, you're like,
time to go,
eating really fast or dumping your food because you don't have enough time and you got to go, right?
Yeah.
So you never ever get to come down. So then you go from this intense environment, right, and then you come home,
right? And so I used to tell people I'm an intensity junkie.
Oh yeah, we all are. Hell yes. And adrenaline, intensity, go. That is why we struggle coming home. I mean, the civilian sector can relate when they're in these high acute situations where they, firefighters, nurses, police, all that. At any moment, it could change at any second. And we get off on that. We're the first to admit. But then when you go from something that's more intense than anything in our day-to-day life, that is an abnormal level of intensity.
ER on steroids.
Yeah, exactly. ER on steroids. Yeah. So you come home, and then what happened when you came home? How did you respond? Like, what was going on?
Well, I remember that I got to Travis Air Force Base and it was nighttime and they wouldn't let us off the plane. It was about 2 hours before they let us off the plane. And they told us on the plane, they said, when you get off the plane, as soon as you're able to, take off your uniform.
Reminder, this is Vietnam era. This is the time, we call it the silent generation for a reason.
Not welcomed home with loving arms.
People didn't talk about it.
So they wouldn't let us off the plane for 2 hours because there were protesters in the airport, and it was excruciating. Those 2 hours were excruciating for everyone on the plane. And then and then they told us to take your uniform off as soon as you can. And so I remember being in a fog. I remember that I needed to get help to find out where to go to get a bus. I needed to get a bus because I was at Travis Air Force Base and I needed to get to San Francisco International Airport to get a plane to LA where I was going to meet with a friend. And so I remember the fogginess of my brain and not feeling like I'm out of my element. I'm out of place. I don't, later on it was, I didn't fit in, I don't belong here. But right then it was like, how do I find the bus? I eventually got to the bus, and I remember being on the bus. It was a red silver Trailways bus. So that stuck in my memory. And it was raining, and so there was raindrops all over the window. That felt familiar to me, the raindrops. And I remember getting lost in the raindrop on the window, just being lost in that. And finally, when we get to San Francisco International Airport, the bus driver had to pull me out of the raindrop basically and get me to focus so I could get off and find my way to the plane.
Did you have, like, when you left for Vietnam, did you have something to come home to? Did you have a house? Did you have an apartment? Were you living with your family? Like when you came home, where?
So what I did was first, see, I was in LA for 3 years before I went to Vietnam.
Okay.
And so but it was just an apartment, and I didn't have it then. But a nurse that I was really close to was living down in LA. And so she met me at the airport down in LA, and I went to her place. And I think it was the next day we went to the hospital where I used to work, because the woman that I worked with, her name was B. Marinello. She was like a mom to me, and she was in the hospital and she was sick. So I went to see her and did a lot of crying with her. And then I remember we went to a grocery store. I think it was like a Safeway or something. And I stepped forward to go through the door, and it flew open. The door flew open. And I freaked out. And then the other thing that happened was that when we were driving either to or from the hospital, there was a siren. And I literally dove my body to the footwell, and I had no idea why I did that. It was just an automatic thing, right? And then Ellie said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I don't know." I got back up in my seat. It was just that something got triggered,
Reactionary.
Yeah.
It's how you're trained, though. I mean, that's how you're trained. I mean,
and coming home from overseas is just in itself, even under ideal circumstances. I was overseas for about 4.5 years, and great experience. Not anything like what you had to endure in Vietnam. This was fun for me.
yeah.
But even just coming home after that, when you talk about going to the store and the doors flying open, it reminds me of just walking into a Walmart, and you have 32 options for cereal, 32 options for deodorant, and just how overwhelming that alone is. I mean, it's a good thing. It's great that we have options, but something so small for somebody who's had to go without it for a long time, it's weird, but can be difficult and overwhelming to process.
I did the same thing. I came back to the US. I was in Germany. I came back to the US for a conference, and I just wanted to get some food real quick to have in the hotel room. And I think it's like in a Walmart or something. And I was like looking at this wall of yogurt. And my friends are like, "What's wrong?" And I'm just sitting there.
So much.
8 flavors.
Yeah, it is overwhelming.
Yeah, that, like you said, like her and I were not coming out of a combat, situation. I mean, we had our ups and downs of experience, but not that consistent intensity. And just that little bit for us was like, whoa.
Yeah.
Very weird.
Yeah. Yeah. So I spent some time in LA, and then I went back to New Jersey, which is where I grew up. And I literally couldn't relate to anybody at home. I went to see my dad, who was in Florida, and he gave me a party. My dad was really proud of me and my service, and he's a World War II vet. And so he gave this big party for me, but I didn't know any of those people. And I didn't really even want to be there. And I remember my brother was there, and he was actually getting drunk. And I said, "What are you doing? I should be the one that get drunk, not you."
When you were in Cucci, did you have attacks? I mean, did you have attacks where your people got injured or worse? Did that ever happen?
Yeah, so I was there a month when they had the first mortar attack. It was early February, and that was the first mortar attack. I'd never heard mortars before. So I was in my shower, and it's crude, there's like a tank of water on top of the hooch, and the
Yeah.
water comes down in like a little drip thing. And there's 3 sides to the shower stall, and the other one is wide open. So I was in the shower, and how you take a military shower, you wet yourself down, then you soap, and then you turn the water off, right? And then you rinse. So I was getting ready to rinse when I hear this sound. It was like a whistle, and then a thud, and then an explosion, right? And I thought, I wonder what that is.
And you're naked in the middle of
Sudsy.
a tent,
I'm
some water
naked,
dripping on you.
I'm naked and I'm full of soap.
I think you're the OG MASH. I mean, it really is like a scene.
Yeah. Right.
And then here comes this soldier in full battle gear, helmet, the Kevlar vest, rifle, everything.
You're like, can I just get a towel?
He said, ma'am, we're being mortared. You need to go to the bunker right now. I said, okay. So I turned the water on and tried to get the soap off me. He said, ma'am, if you don't come with me right now, I'm going to have to carry you there.
Oh gosh.
I feel like we need to get you and Loretta Swett together. We interviewed her like in the beginning. And so I think it would be hilarious to everything you talk about. I've watched the whole series of MASH, and I'm just like, I could see these different scenes, and I'm like, it really was like it must have been weird to watch MASH and go, oh yeah. I mean, we know it's above and beyond the comedy, but if you scrape off that frosting, you're like, yeah, that's real.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yes. So yeah, so I put, all I had with me was this long, it's a robe, but it was for really super hot weather, and a short sleeve, and it only came to like just below my butt, right?
Oh.
And so, but I'm all soaped up. I'm wet and soapy. And so I put it on, and that's all I could do, right? And I go slipping and sliding through the hooch, right, to get to the bunker. So I go out, and it's, the sun's super bright, and there's just a little bit of time in the sun, and then I go in the bunker, and I go down into I hadn't been in the bunker before. And so I go down, and I'm totally blinded because I went from the bright to the dark. And fortunately, somebody inside knew that experience, and they grabbed my hand. They grabbed my hand and guided me down to where the bench, because I'd never been in the bunker before. I didn't know what was in there. They guided me to the bench. I'm sitting in the bench, and I'm trying to cover myself, right? and eventually my sight clears up, and I see my chief nurse in her helmet. She's wearing a helmet, black jacket, and
total battle rattle.
Yeah, and then so there were some women that were in muumuus, and remember muumuus? Some
Right.
were in muumuus, and some were in fatigues. And anyway, so finally I get in there, and I can see and hear again. And chief nurse says, as soon as we get the all clear, you can all go back to what you were doing.
You're like, thank goodness. Thank you.
Normal ops.
No sooner had she said that when a soldier points his head back inside the bunker, and he said, we need Lieutenant Blum in the OR right now.
Oh no.
And so I looked over at her, and she nodded her head. And
short little house coat there.
So I went back into the hooch and back to the shower because now I had mud on my feet, right? So I had to clean off the soap and the mud on my feet, and then try to dry myself. So I'm kind of anxious, and I'm wet, and it's hot, and I have to get into my fatigues and boots. And so I'm trying to dry myself off and get into, how hard it is to get into fatigues and boots when your body's not really dry.
It's just hard to get into them anyway. So yeah, that's right.
And then
any speed.
So the mortars are still coming in. I can see them and hear them. And I thought, okay, I'm going to just run a zigzag course over to the OR. Maybe they won't get me. And so that's what I did. I ran a zigzag course over to the OR. And not that I'd be safe in the OR, because we don't have sandbags or anything there. It's just a tin roof. But I got in there, and I got into my scrub dress and just went to work again, right?
I was waiting for you to tell us that you had to rinse off with a saline bag.
No.
That was plan B.
But we had tunnels, Hoochie has the tunnels. So we had a tunnel opening outside the OR, about 8 feet from the OR door is a tunnel opening. And so we would throw blood and stuff down there and yell obscenities. I was always afraid that they were gonna, I was always afraid they were gonna come up from the tunnel and booby trap our outhouse, which was right beside the tunnel opening.
See,
I'd be throwing bedpans full of you know what out that thing.
Yeah, but in the OR we didn't have bedpans.
and they're sleeping.
Good point. Good point.
Was there any casualties?
Oh, always.
But I mean, from that mortar, like you lost people.
Yeah.
But it says something the way you're like, yeah. Like it's weird how we attune to scenarios. You're like, yeah, of course. Like mortar just came in, something blew up, people died.
Yeah.
Oh, and I had to go back to work, by the way. Like, it is for some people that's just inconceivable, right? For us, we're like, oh yeah, we get it. Like that's what you're doing.
Makes me want to not complain.
When COVID happened, a friend of mine called me and said, hey, she was asking, we were talking about, this is when it first started. And there was like, New York was getting overwhelmed and, I mean, people are dying left and right. And she was at this hospital and they were talking about potentially having to go into like mass cal triage, right? And for the audience that's maybe not medical, that triage is the opposite of what we normally do because we've got to preserve our resources. So if you're the worst of the worst of the worst, and we know you're going to take 30 units of blood,
you don't want that black
we're not
card.
helping you first. I mean, that's harsh to say that, right? So anyway,
but that's the nature of triage, and that's what we
that is right. When we're in that situation in a mass cal thing, and that's how it has to go. It has to go by resources. So she was a prior military nurse reservist, and so of course to her it's second nature. And they're trying to present it, and the civilian doctors are like, nope. And now let me preface, these were not at like trauma hospitals, they have a different, they're like, no. They couldn't conceive that you would let the worst have to let them go to preserve your resourres. And on top of it, in their defense, there's only like 800 other things going on at the same time. They can't figure out people are dying, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not saying that there wouldn't have come around to it, but it was just so overwhelming to hear that she was like, they don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear it.
That shift in thinking.
Yeah. Right. It was interesting to have that conversation. So, and that's how we're trained. That's like from the babiest of nurses or medical or just military, we all did annual training and it was mass cal situations. And that is exactly how we had to train, the worst got put aside. So yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting.
We called those expectant, and we usually had a corpsman or a nurse with them.
Yeah, and in a civilian hospital, you're doing a hero's effort to save them. You're gonna do everything you can to save. You're gonna throw the blood at them. They're gonna do this and that. My grandfather was one of those. I mean, he had steel land on top of him, like a big roll of steel, and he should have been expectant. And in any triage situation, any mass cal situation, he would have not ever made it. But it wasn't. It was civilian. It was at his job. Somebody heard him gurgling, saved him. He said it was a nurse, but I'm like, thanks, Pop. I like that, but we know it was a medic. I'll give it to you, MZ. We know who was out there. The paramedic was out there, not the nurse. But he always said a nurse saved him. So, but anyways, 35 pints of blood later. Ooh. And 5 codes. Yeah, he survived, like, and intact, like mentally intact. And
that's great.
Yeah, he did end up with silent hepatitis C and stuff like that. But point being is that in a war setting, my grandfather had never been alive another 40 years. That just would not have happened.
Yeah,
right? So, just interesting. Okay, so
I had a hard time relating to
the
world I came back to. totally. Like, other women were talking about their nails and colors and clothes
Right.
and hair and I've been living with life and death minute by minute for a year, and I just couldn't relate to anybody. It was really hard.
Were you finding other nurses, military nurses? Were you hearing?
Nope.
So,
Nope.
so I say that with intent.
Community.
Well, it was the silent generation. Like nobody talked about this. You just survived in silence. So the fact, Sarah, that you are 85 years young, you're active, you did all this healing, and you and I have talked on our own on a whole other level on what you did for healing. And we're not going to give you that. You have to go read the book. Giving you the tips. We gave you the tips on how to live long. We're not going to give you all the other stuff.
Pre-orders available right now. womenunderfire.net.
You have to go there to get it. But you did all this healing, and it just speaks volumes of the amount of trauma that you endured, that you witnessed, that you endured, everything, dealing with the service members, hearing their stories, all of that. And yet here you are now on this other side saying, I'm going to write about this, which, for a lot of people that don't write, or maybe that you do, you'd understand it's healing, but it's also extremely vulnerable. I mean, you put your emotions out there, and there's a part of you, and I don't know if you experienced this, but I did when I had published. It was like kind of a little bit of biting my nails, like, okay, what are they gonna think? Like, even though you're like, it doesn't matter, it's my story. And then the little girl in you's like,
Please don't throw tomatoes.
Oh, that happened to me.
I threw tomatoes.
So in the 80s, in the mid 80s, when there were protests,
Yeah.
I think it was 83, and I went to Washington, D.C., and I was wearing my field jacket, and I'm not sure what else I was wearing, but I know I had the field jacket on, and I had eggs and tomatoes thrown at me from protesting.
Literally.
They were protesting. I don't know what they were protesting. Maybe it was that, but
Wow.
in the war. But yeah, there were actually a number of times that happened to me, and it was horrible. It was horrible to have that experience, and I didn't really know how to react, and I didn't want to like explode in anger, which I could have.
Yeah, but what are we all taught, right? In the military, we're all taught
keep your bearing.
You keep your head down. If that starts up, you get out. You know what I mean? Like, we are not supposed to, like, you ran into, like, we could all run into it by accident, but we are trained that we cannot be political. We cannot get in the middle of it. Like, we are supposed to get out. Like,
yeah.
So it doesn't shock me that you're like, whoa, like.
And in 75, do you remember 75 is when Saigon fell? And I was actually in graduate school. I was at the University of Washington graduate school when Saigon fell. And I was having all kinds of emotional reactions. And so I'm in nursing. I'm in the nursing program, the graduate program in psychosocial nursing. You'd think that they would have a clue that I might have some reaction. Nothing.
Nope.
No. And so I literally ran out. And I remember crying and screaming and walking around the buildings and recreating the trauma that I had back in Vietnam when I saw Johnny.
Wow.
So there, yeah. And then I went in 1982, they had this first salute to Vietnam veterans. It was in Washington, D.C. And I went, and I had no idea what to expect, and I was very kind of leery. But on the plane going to Washington, D.C. for the salute, there were guys from Alaska, Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. The plane was full, and we found each other. And so the whole way to Washington, D.C., we were talking to one another, connecting and telling stories. And that felt comfortable and like home.
Yeah.
Somebody that could relate and understand.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is where I want to go, because we initially were like, yeah, we'll do good 30 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever. Like an hour later, we're like, I'm enthralled, I'm listening. So we're going to wrap this up. I want to wrap this up because we're going to bring you back and we're going to do another one on your first book. So this one, Warrior Nurse, PTSD and Healing, that's coming out in March 6th. And this is your story about what you went through. And we gave you a little taste, Vietnam and what they were dealing with, and the resiliency level that you had to be at. And Sarah, you're like at a whole other level, because you're like, oh, Coochie, I'll take that. You can just go over there and walk into the fire and not walking out of it.
And from the sounds of it too, like Sarah, you've been doing a lot to thereafter. I think I read something about research on Agent Orange and the birth defects that came from mothers who were there as well.
Yep.
I mean, just continuing to serve well after leaving Vietnam.
Yeah. I mean,
well, that's what my life is service. So yeah, I went back to Washington, D.C., as I said, and at that Salute to Vietnam Veterans, they had the first hearing on PTSD.
what year was that?
That was 1982.
It's about right. Yeah, because believe it or not, I don't know about all the services. I'm pretty sure it's all the services, but it wasn't until, I think it was like 90 or 93, somewhere in, when they started doing the first PTSD boards. They were doing, because they were just separating these people that they under disciplinary when it was actually PTSD, so they finally started to sort of recognize it and handle that.
Yeah. So I was at the very first hearing on PTSD.
Wow.
And the energy in the room was just amazing, and a lot of tears, a lot of excruciating pain. And the people that were running this hearing at the front, one of them was Dr. Arthur Blank. That was his last name, Blank. And they looked to me like they were numb. They were like stones up there. And all around me are my brother and sister vets, and with extreme anguish. And then I went to the Agent Orange hearing. Senator Daschle was in charge of that, and he was very receptive, very open and very receptive, and giving us the information that they had. But again, the anguish in the room was palpable. It was just horrendous. You're hearing all these horrible stories about what was happening to them, guys taking their shirts off and showing us what was happening to their skin, telling us about their babies and what was happening to them. And that was the very first one. And I recorded all of that. I have a little, the original tapes.
Yeah.
And I recorded all that.
Wow.
And that in itself is just an amazing experience to have and to go through. And so I think I wrote about that in the book. I think that's in the book. Yeah. And then I remember when Saigon fell in 75 and I was in graduate school and I was coming unglued, and I went to the instructor and is to try to explain what was happening to me. And what I was told was, get your shit together or get out.
Oh my gosh.
I'm in graduate school on a scholarship, and I can't get out because I don't want to, because this is where I'm going. I want to be a psychotherapist. And so, yeah, that's what they said to me. Get your shit together, get out. So I did get my shit together. I built another wall around my.
Yeah. Another compartmentalized box happens, and that's where we're so good at it.
Yes.
I just had a friend reach out to me that if you saw her, extremely well put together, and she said, I know I look like I have everything together, I'm falling apart inside. And I said, we'll talk. We are masters at masking, absolute masters, because our job in the military is to defend and protect the country. And then you subculture it to the medicine, and it is to take care of our brothers and sisters in arms to make sure that they can continue to protect and defend the country. And so we don't really, nowhere in there hear anything about us and who we are. And honestly, we're really, the way we're built, we're fine with that. We're fine with service. We're good with it. Yeah, like move forward, but the reality is it will get us if we don't stop and handle our crap. It's going to get us at some point. If we do not process what happened, if we do not let the emotions flow through us, then it's going to get us. And so, Sarah, when you're here talking to us and then you write this whole book on it, I just want to say to people, like, look, you can't get any more frontline and real than this. That's 8 decades and 6 of those in adulthood, that not only did you deal with it, you have definitely firsthand experience, but then you went into the field to try to help it in all this modalities that you were using. And again, that's what this book is about, is like how you healed and what you did to do that. So really, you can't do any better than that. You are as a primary source in so many levels.
Choosing to not stay in that cycle of PTSD and get unstuck.
Choosing.
How do you do that? Yeah, it's a conscious decision.
Exactly. So I said we could talk to you for like 5 hours, but we're going to wrap this part up. And so here's the things that are happening. So March 6th is the actual release of Warrior Nurse, PTSD and Healing. You can pre-order it at www.womenunderfire.net. So you can encourage you all to go out there and order that book. How much is it right now? What's it on sale for?
$21.95. And right now, if you pre-order it, there's a 15% discount.
Even better. And so I encourage you for a lot of reasons. One, you are really going to understand soup to nuts on this from a women's perspective, a medical person's perspective, from a veteran perspective, you're a military person's perspective, you are going to learn a lot. And number 2, you're supporting authors. And I will tell you, as an author myself, we don't get rich off of this. There are very few Colleen Hoovers and those kind of people out there. Like, great for them, and I'm super excited for them, but the rest of us are just living on pennies. We don't get crap. So go support them. Support small business. Exactly. So, and then you can find Sarah on social media. You're going to hear my paper rustle because I can't remember it all. You can find her on Facebook, sarah.l.blum.1. On Twitter at Sarah L. Blum. On Blue Sky, look at you, progressive Blue Sky. And Threads. I'm not even on those. Like, geez. She's on Blue Sky at nursevet.bsky.social, and then on Threads at Nurse Scribe. And that will all be up in our notes. So if you didn't write it down, don't worry about it. You'll be able to find it in our show notes. So it's all good there. So, Sarah, do you have any last thoughts for this episode?
No, I became a nurse psychotherapist afterwards, after I did my own work, and I became a nurse psychotherapist because I felt like I knew trauma from the inside out and outside in. And I helped a lot of people. And that's my desire in writing this book, is to be able to help people that have PTSD now, and to help veterans, and for them to know that they don't have to be stuck with the worst of it, that they can actually overcome it and feel better and be more themselves and live the life that they choose.
Great.
Just got to do the work.
What do you got, MZ?
Just want to thank you, Sarah, for hanging out with us and giving us your experience, your perspective. And this has been a treat.
Great. I'm glad.
There we go.
On March 14th, I'm having a book launch in Seattle. It's going to be at Tagney Jones Hall, which is part of the Seattle Opera House. And it's March 14th. It's a Friday afternoon at 3 p.m. And I'm really looking forward to it. I'm hoping so what we're gonna do, we're gonna have the veterans choir that I'm a part of, and we're gonna sing some songs that I chose. And I'm also having one of the opera singers is gonna sing a song that was for the nurses from Vietnam. It's called Till the White Dove Flies Alone, and I cry every time I hear it. And then I'm having two speakers. Pam Binder, who's a very prolific writer, and I think you'll love her books if you get any. I'm trying to catch up right now on her books. She's the president of the Pacific Northwest Writers Association, and she's going to speak. And so is Warren Etheridge, and he is one of the teachers in the Red Badge Writing Project. And I encourage people that don't know about it to check out the Red Badge Writing Project. It was started by Tom Skerritt, the actor, and his name, sorry, the other guy's name I can't think of right now. And a lot of veterans are in the writing program, Red Badge Writing Program, and it's really helpful to get everything out, to really get your feelings out and to describe it. So yes, I'm having him speak, and Pam Binder and the veterans choir sing, and then I'm going to sell and sign books. And I'm asking JJ from Path with Art to video record the whole event so that I can put it on YouTube, so that the people that can't be there can actually participate and see it.
Sweet.
March 14th.
That's awesome. March 14th. Yes. Perfect. All right. I think we're good. So from everybody here, Bullets to Bedpans from MZ. Me, Detox, we really appreciate you guys listening. We're so excited for Sarah's book launch. So kind of keep track, keep watch. If you subscribe we're on podcast.co. And if you subscribe, you'll get notifications when we come out. If you share, like, and do all that fun stuff, that helps us. And if you have comments or thoughts or anything like that, we appreciate it. So MZ, you out?
I'm out.
So you guys have an awesome week, and peace out.